Yo, when I say I don't work, I only mean that I ended regular full time employment at age 40. Since those like me who are on disability don't seem to need it, I'll explain. Though highly intelligent, I was born with physical problems and severe learning disability that got worse with time. I could only graduate high school via a special program for problem students. I didn't go to college since no college could accommodate my needs. From there, I worked many jobs, but could only secure very low paying jobs. Half the time, I couldn't even find work until my father stepped in for me. For example, one time my father gave my manager money for Christmas. One company hired me because my father's company was funding theirs. A boss from another company hired me because his child was enrolled at my father's daycare center. After my dad retired from full time work, he told some security companies that if they hired me, he would work for them part time in addition. After he would quit, they'd find an excuse to fire me. Then there were cases of mistreatment and discrimination. For instance, I was fired for supposedly attaching and raising the American flag upside down on the flagpole, which I would never do, while a recent Muslim immigrant from another shift had the same job and was likely to have done it. In another company, while standing on a very high ladder, another employee shook the ladder to scare me into thinking I might fall. And I have an especially hard time understanding foreign accents, which made it hard to communicate with Mexican and Indian employees, which made them angry at me. At the company I worked at the longest, fellow employees kept purposely blowing big farts, which I had to smell and breathe. When I shredded paper, office people mixed their garbage with the discarded paper. It had lots of used boogery Kleenex and old food, which small flies circled around. Once there was even a dead mouse. They wouldn't stop even after they were told, and a number of companies' employees would go out of their way to get me in trouble for minor rule violations, while rule violations of others were ignored. Then there were safety issues. Once, before even getting to work, my car was crushed by a bus due to my poor driving ability. There was an incident where I was responsible for opening and closing big shop doors. I came within a fraction of a second of crushing the top of a truck with a door. At that same company, I got two warning notices at once. One for accidentally putting a 460 gauge rod into a 320 gauge compressor. The supervisor complained that the compressor could have spit out pieces of the rod like deadly bullets. Yet the company didn't care enough to make sure the machine had its proper 320 gauge head to make it impossible to insert a bigger rod. Instead, they substituted a bigger bore for the missing one, creating the likelihood of eventual error. My other warning was for correcting my mistake of taking the wrong rods out of the furnace when it was set on a different temperature to heat treat to different rods. The supervisor said that the hot rod came close to an electrical box, which would have caused an explosion and destroyed part of the company. Yet I never removed rods until I was taught that by a fellow employee. He'd also teased me by pulling out a 2,000-degree hot rod and chasing me with it. He was never caught or reprimanded. Years later, in a different department, I was taking caffeine pills to help cope with my 12-hour days of hard physical labor and no air conditioning. I accidentally overdosed, became extremely ill, and couldn't go to work the next day. This stressed others in my department. In his haste under the heavy workload, a fellow employee was wrestling with a heavy machine which fell on him, scalped him, and put him into a coma. While working security at another job, I found a splatter of blood. It was a freak accident where somebody collapsed right in the middle of a tiny staircase, which I couldn't find in time. Therefore, they tried to blame me for trying to murder someone, then fired me. At another company, I got the ends of two fingers crushed to a bloody pulp in a punch press, and this is why this finger is still how fat it is, and like that, in the middle. It was due to my mind wandering and also because the man who set up the machine didn't screw the guards down low enough. After I went to the hospital, they thought to blame me for lowering the guards to where they should be in order to avoid blame for the accident, although they realized that it would be impossible since I had to hold my crushed fingers together with my other hand the whole time to avoid having my fingers falling off and bleeding to death. They finally witnessed the setup man tampering with another machine and fired him. At yet another company, I was simply sorting washers, but I was reprimanded because I mixed two different washers together which looked identical, yet one had a different tolerance. The supervisor told me that I could have caused people's deaths if the washers with lower internal strength were used to hold a trailer together. And if that was true, why in the after they look identical? I mean, why would anybody make them look identical? Then there was the ongoing aggravation that my learning disability caused others. Then there was the ongoing harassment by both men and women because I had nothing to do with relationships with women, which was none of their business. And the women wouldn't like me anyway, just harassing me there. They get a kick out of that. Then there were conflicts simply due to my personality and other differences. Finally, I developed a permanent and serious nerve disorder, likely due to heart damage from caffeine pill overdose. Many people have died from caffeine overdoses. Look that up. I get panic attacks, not many lately, but I was getting regular severe panic attacks, which are debilitating without emergency medication. Doesn't happen often now, but I have the emergency pill just in case. And my sleep is regularly disturbed regardless. I have no sleeping pattern. So for those who complain that I'm cheating the government, shut up! You likely wouldn't even want me to work with you if you had, worked in the same department. Instead of adding even more scorn on those whom wicked society refuses to accommodate and treats like inferior beings, concern yourself with the tens of thousands who are clearly welfare cheats and try doing something about it. Catch you later.